Welcome to the College of Education 10-Minute Research Break, a podcast devoted to highlighting research by Illinois State University's College of Education, faculty, staff, and students. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and take a break with us.
Hi, I'm Tricia Class. Today I'm talking with Dr. Jadallah, who teaches in the School of Teaching and Learning. The article we will discuss today focuses on elementary students' use of analogies and social collaborative reasoning discussion sessions. Welcome, May. Thanks for talking with me.
Thank you for having me, Tricia.
The study you and your colleagues carried out combines two key topics in a unique way. First, using the collaborative reasoning approach to student discussion, and second, examining the use of analogies in these discussions. Could you first describe the collaborative reasoning teaching model and how it works in classrooms?
Certainly. CR is an open, free-flowing discussion approach that is based on small group settings. The discussions are designed to be intellectually stimulating, personally engaging, and socially appealing. Texts used in these discussions play an important role in promoting students' critical and analytical thinking. Typically, the text involves a moral dilemma or a decision-making situation around an issue that does not have a clear-cut solution. Children in any one classroom are divided into small heterogeneous groups, balancing their gender, ethnicity, talkativeness, and achievement level. Students typically read a story either individually or in pairs before class time. The teachers call one group of students at a time to discuss the story, while the other groups complete work at their seats. A CR discussion typically begins with the teacher's review of the discussion guidelines and the introduction of a central question about the text. And I'm going to give a little bit of what the guidelines are. Students are told that there is no right or wrong answer to the central question, but they have to make the best decision that considers both sides of an issue. The students are required to make the best decision that considers both sides of the issue. During the first discussion, the children are told not to raise their hands to express their opinion, to respect other people while they're talking and not to interrupt them, to invite everyone to participate, to challenge each other's ideas but not the people who are providing these ideas, and to use textual evidence. The discussions are thus child-led but teacher-facilitated, in the sense that the children have control over turn-taking, topic, and interpretation of the text. But the teacher simply intervenes when necessary by scaffolding and reminding the children with the guidelines as needed. The discussions end with a teacher-led debriefing session to talk with the children about the strengths and weaknesses of the day's discussion and to help them set goals for the following discussion. On average, these discussions last for about 15 minutes.
And then second, could you explain why and how the topic of analogy is important in the process of student learning?
This is a great question. Analogy has been found very important in learning new concepts, problem solving, and scientific discovery. One of the main aspects of the nature of science, for example, is creativity and the use of analogy. In analogy, we use something that we are familiar with to understand another thing that is novel, abstract, or hard to comprehend. For example, historically, scientists had used the planetary model to understand the atomic structure. Scientists were far more familiar with the movement of planets in their orbits around the sun, while the atom was beyond naked eye examination. The familiarity with the planet's movement around the sun provided a foundation to understand and explain the atomic structure, at least for a while. The same applies to the use of hydraulic model to explain the blood circulation system and the billiard ball model to understand the movement of gases. All of these scientific theories were founded on analogies. The interesting finding is that students who are trained to use analogy have shown to retain new information for longer periods of time and to be able to use analogy to solve novel problems, things that are entirely new to them. So retention of information and transfer of skills are improved when analogy is used.
Your study had a very detailed methodology that examined multiple group discussions across different schools and classrooms. Could you describe what you believe are the important features of your group-selected methodology and/or data?
In collaborative reasoning, we are not only interested in the final product, we are far more interested in the process that goes in those discussions. As such, in conjunction with the pre and post test design model, we typically collect the qualitative data that the children produce during the discussions. So in the study that we are talking about today, we worked in 6 classrooms. That those classrooms were in 4 different schools, and each classroom had 3 discussion groups. Each discussion group had 10 collaborative reasoning discussions. So in total, we had 180 discussions, which were all transcribed line by line, word by word, and we ended up with a corpus of more than 40,000 lines of discussions. For this particular study, we took a subsample of this, and so we end up typically with massive amount of data that we examine carefully and code minute by minute, following the guidelines of the microgenetic method. The microgenetic method helps us understand a variety of issues, including the use of analogy. Once the codes are applied to the data set, we use a variety of statistical techniques to understand the patterns that emerge from the data set. So, for example, in the study, we used the Poisson regression analysis with generalized estimated equation techniques to examine patterns of analogy generation across discussions. We also used generalized gamma mixed model in which discussions were treated as a random cluster effect. In addition, we used event history analysis to better understand the snowballing of the use of analogy, and lag sequential analysis to examine the temporal impact of children's use of analogy in the construction of their arguments. So it's very labor intensive, but it gives a profound understanding of how children develop cognitively.
As you explained, you examined several facets of the use of analogy over time. What do you think are some of the most relevant findings about collaborative reasoning and children's use of analogy for teachers and teacher educators?
We can certainly say that classroom discussions and social interactions are essential for cognitive development. The results show that the use of analogy snowballed or spread from one child to another and occurred in increasing frequency. Our explanation is that once a child introduces an analogy, other children appropriate this tool by observing first and then by engaging in these lively child-led discussions. While children often repeat or elaborate analogies presented by other children, the snowball phenomenon was almost entirely due to the increasing rate of novel analogies. This increasing percentage of new analogies is noteworthy because generating a new analogy requires the ability to consider the issue from an entirely different perspective that others have not mentioned in the discussion. This fact implies that the snowball phenomenon cannot be attributed to the simple or shallow mimicry, but instead implies a deepened understanding of analogies. We also have evidence that analogies progress from simple surface analogies to pure higher level relational analogies, where the familiar and novel elements are compared based on relationship between objects and not only surface similarities. This is a more demanding cognitive skill that collaborative reasoning discussions nurture and provide students with an environment that allows these skills to develop and mature. We kindly and warmly invite teachers to try to use collaborative reasoning discussions in their classrooms to help facilitate those higher level quality thinking skills in children.
What future research do you think should be done to extend the work in this study?
I am going to highlight only one element. I think that it is extremely important that we examine the teacher role in those discussions, especially in the use of analogy. In this study, we focused only on children's use of analogy without considering the teacher impact. And I think that it's imperative that we examine the teacher role in helping children think while using analogies.
Thank you. It was a delight to read the study. It was, as you said, labor intensive, but so well documented. And I really appreciated that snowball effect. One analogy took some time, but then the students quickly followed up and built on the other students' knowledge. So it gives credence to giving students time to talk things over in time. Mm-hmm. I'm sure today's conversation will encourage others to read your publication.
Thank you very much, Trisha.
Thank you.
Day.
The full citation for today's article is Lin, Anderson, Jadallah, Kuo, Wu, Hummel, Miller, Nguyen-Jahiel, Morris, Kim, and Dong, 2012. Children's Use of Analogy During Collaborative Reasoning. Child Development, Volume 83, Number 4, 1429 to 1443. The citation can also be found at the college's website, education.illinoisstate.edu/faculty-staff/research/podcasts. Join us for future Research Break podcasts.
This podcast is sponsored by Illinois State University's College of Education, where we strive to assure that all students realize the democratic ideal through our teaching, research, and service to the field of education.